I'm Don Farber with Sage Alerts and Workflow. Going to be spending the next 45 to almost 60 minutes with you today talking about this solution called Sage Alerts and Workflow, very specifically talking about how you can utilize it and leverage it to make your organization more data-driven. So just a couple of comments about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start out by talking about this concept of becoming a more data-driven organization, what it means, what it boils down to in real life in terms of business scenarios. And we'll talk about the components of a data-driving solution such as alerts and workflow. At a certain point, we'll also jump into the application for a demonstration. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time in the alerts and workflow application for the simple reason that it's not an end-user-based application. Think of it more as a kind of analogous to a smoke detector for your organization's Sage business data. And what I mean by that, as we'll see a little bit later on, the purpose of alerts and workflow is to monitor your Sage application data, look for conditions, scenarios that are of importance to your organization, and then alerts and workflow responds to those conditions accordingly in a number of different ways. So it's really very much an application that's installed, configured, you tell it what to look for and what to do if and when certain conditions arise, and then you turn it on and walk away from it. You and your colleagues are recipients of alerts, and reports, and workflow that's all generated by the Sage Alerts and Workflow solution. But we will have a look at the technology a little bit later on in today's session. I do want to also mention that this session is being recorded, so if you'd like to share it with colleagues, you're welcome to do so. We'll also be happy to leave you with a copy of the PowerPoint presentation as well if you'd like it. And last but not least, I do have a big old glass of water by my desk side, so if you have a few seconds of silence coming from my side of the phone, well, that's just me grabbing a little bit of hydration. So I think the first question that we need to answer is around this concept of becoming more data-driven. The question is, why? What are the benefits that an organization such as yours could typically see from adopting a more data-driven approach to your business? Well, if we actually pull some results from some existing clients using the alerts and workflow technology, we're seeing benefits such as reducing a client's account receivable time to pay by 30%, avoiding 5 supplier price increases in the past 12 months, reducing late shipments, increasing monthly AR collections, and finally freeing up over 100 hours of staff time every month. Now, these are just a few examples of the results, of the benefits that organizations like yours have seen from adopting the alerts and workflow technology. Hopefully, with these scenarios, that's enough to get your attention and interest to look a little bit further into the alerts and workflow technology. So now let's go back a little bit and talk more about this concept of data-driven. And when we really talk about a data-driven organization, what we're really talking about is business intelligence. We're talking about an organization's ability to use the details, the history of your business activities to help you increase both your profitability and your productivity. Now, the key thing about becoming data-driven is that it looks at your organization's business data in real time. So as opposed to running reports or other analytics, which typically are out of date by the time they reach someone's desk, the whole idea about becoming a more data-driven organization is to utilize data in real time. As soon as certain information, conditions, or activities occur, we want to deliver them to the relevant people and automatically execute the appropriate responses. Now, when we talk about such initiatives as a data-driven initiative, interesting enough, what we find out is that historically, this type of approach has been restricted to just managers and executives within an organization. And we find that it is those C-level people who are typically tasked with analyzing key performance indicators and other metrics in order to get a good sense for what's going on within a business and to proactively make decisions that positively impact the future success of a business. Typically, these same folks, executives and managers, are provided with analytical tools. You may have seen them referred to as slice and dice technologies, and these managers and executives are also given the time to review reports, to look at analytics, and perform their research. Now, there's something a little bit nagging about this concept of data-driven initiatives being restricted to just managers and executives. And that's the following. If it's true that an organization can be helped by managers and executives looking at business activities and scenarios, isn't it true, wouldn't it be true that the other people within your organization, the worker bees, the folks in the trenches, they're the ones that really on a daily basis help to put together and execute on the little pictures of success that an organization realizes? And so the conclusion that we reach is that a data-driven approach to business should not be something that is restricted to just managers and executives. It needs to be something that's adopted by all members of an organization. And that's a key concept in becoming more data-driven. It can't be a privilege of just a select few within a business. So, what if we took the idea of taking all of the analytical tools and reports that are given to managers and executives and make all of those analytical tools available to everyone else within an organization? What's your thought about taking an approach like that? Well, if you're like most organizations, your immediate response is, heck no. The folks in the trenches, the worker bees within an organization, they already have their days filled with their tasks, generating and delivering invoices and fulfilling orders, etc. So we don't want to give a grandiose analytical tool to our everyday worker bees, our everyday staff outside of executives. The conclusion that we reach is that different people within an organization need access to different types of business intelligence. And so what we need to do, and this is key to achieving this data-driven approach, is that we need to match the right kind of business intelligence to the right kind of people within our organization. And that brings us back to the topic of how this business intelligence is used. Managers and executives use business intelligence to gain insight into an organization's success, failures, how they manage exceptions and anomalies. So managers and executives use BI solutions that let them analyze business activities, spot trends, uncover organizational efficiencies and opportunities for growth. Also, managers and executives tend to use BI solutions that allow them to speculate, to postulate what-if scenarios. If I were to allocate more resources to this part of my business, would it enable us to gain greater revenues? Well, this type of business intelligence that managers and executives today use is not appropriate to an organization's operational staff. The folks in the trenches, the worker bees within an organization, what they need is business intelligence that helps them complete their daily tasks more easily, more quickly, and more intelligently than before. This is a key difference when it comes to business intelligence within an organization. Non-managerial staff need a business intelligence solution that just does two things. Number one, gives the folks in the trenches, the worker bees, a greater visibility into the individual time-sensitive tasks that take up the majority of their time every day. And secondly, the folks within the trenches, the worker bees, need a BI solution that lessens their workload by automating tasks that used to be done manually, i.e., a person within an organization knows if a certain business activity or condition exists, They know what needs to happen. If an invoice becomes past due, it needs to be automatically re-delivered to the customer. Well, what we need are processes like that to be automated. And that dynamic duo of functionality, providing greater visibility into what's happening within a business and automating repetitive tasks, is exactly what is meant by the term operational business intelligence. And that's what we're really driving at here. For a data-driven organization, you need to leverage OBI, Operational Business Intelligence. Again, focusing on just two things: greater visibility for you and your colleagues into what's happening within your business, but on the detailed level, not at the big picture, but at the small picture level. So the folks within the trenches, the worker bees within an organization, they need to know what has happened that applies to them. They need to know what they need to do to complete their part in responding to conditions like this, and they need this information to be delivered to them when and how they need it, not via a report, not a day or 2 days or a week later. They need it delivered to them dynamically through the most appropriate device. But that's only half of operational business intelligence. The other half is task automation. If you've got one or more folks within your organization whose job it is to do such things as generate and deliver invoices, shipment confirmations, statements, etc., those are perfect examples of manual processes that should be done manually. When a new order is placed, let's automatically generate an order confirmation and send it to the appropriate client. If an item is running low in inventory, has dropped below its reorder level, or is within 10 or 15% of its reorder level, let's have an automated process that generates a purchase order for that client, for that part, and automatically delivers that purchase order to the corresponding vendor. Simply those tasks that right now are being done manually that should be and can be automated through operational business intelligence. So I've given you a lot of background about how operational business intelligence came to be. Let me now share with you the single most common use of operational business intelligence technologies today: handling late paying customers. Unfortunately, this is a challenge which pretty much every business has to deal with today. So consider, you sell products or services to your clients. Sometimes they fail to pay you on time. Heck, sometimes they fail to pay you altogether, but let's hope that eventually they do pay you. How do you currently handle late paying customers? Do you run some combination of reports or analytics to identify late paying customers? When you find out that you have some delinquent clients, what do? Do you need to notify people? Do you need to notify the client, their sales rep or account manager, your CFO? What else do you need to do? Do you need to generate and deliver relevant documents? Well, of course, in this situation, if a client is past due and paying for an invoice, the best thing that you could do would be to regenerate that invoice, or perhaps even the statement for the client, and automatically resend it to them. If a client is delinquent, you need to do some additional research. For example, if a client has one invoice that's past due, what does the rest of their AR situation look like? You might wish to run an AR aging report for that delinquent client and automatically deliver that report to that client's sales rep. And finally, if a client is past due, are there additional actions that you need to take? For example, do you want to put that client on credit hold? Or perhaps you want to change their payment terms to pay in advance. Now, if you answered yes to any of the above 5 items in red, do you do any of these things when a client is delinquent in paying for a purchase that they've made from you? Now ask yourself and answer the following questions. Whose job is it within your organization to identify past due clients? How quickly are delinquent clients identified? Once they're identified, whose job is it to notify the appropriate people, to notify the client, their sales rep, your CFO? whose job is it to generate the appropriate documents, such as an invoice, statement, dunning notice, etc.? How quickly do they get generated? And how soon do they get delivered to the delinquent client? Whose job is it to perform the additional research? How is it done? Most likely manually. And who decides what action to take in regards to a delinquent customer, whether to put them on credit hold, change their payment terms, or take some other action? If you're like most organizations today, the answer to who does these things, who takes these steps, is you and your colleagues. How these steps are done? Mostly manually. And how soon these steps get done are very often not soon enough. A day, multiple days, or a week goes by before you communicate with a delinquent client or let their account manager know that this client of theirs is in fact past due. The reason we've asked these questions is that in order to be as competitive as possible in today's market and as successful in your business as you can possibly be, you must consider automating the processes of detection and response. And that's exactly what operational business intelligence does. It automatically detects critical business conditions and activities for your organization. It automatically notifies the appropriate people in real time via the appropriate device. It automatically generates the required documents and delivers them. It automatically triggers additional research, and it automatically updates your Sage ERP and other business applications so both your people and your systems are in sync with each other. So that's what we're talking about in terms of operational business intelligence and an underlying technology that can support it. So now I'm going to lay out for you the components of Sage Alerts and Workflow. It starts out by automatically monitoring your Sage ERP system, whether it's Sage 100, 300, 500, X3, or anything else. It automatically looks for any business condition that's important to your organization. Now, for those of you running Sage 100, out of the box, Alerts and Workflow ships with roughly 85 pre-configured business conditions, including all of the ones you see on the current slide. If you happen to be running Sage 500, Sage Alerts and Workflow ships with over 100 pre-configured scenarios. And of course, you can tailor those scenarios and you can create an unlimited number of additional business conditions, activities, or scenarios of your own. Do note the little bit in yellow down, or yellow-green, I should say, at the bottom right of this slide. Although we're focusing our conversation today on what Alerts and Workflow and operational business intelligence can do for your Sage ERP application, please know that this is an enterprise-wide monitoring and response technology. So outside of Sage ERP, if you have other business applications, whether they're from Sage or some other vendor, or even are homegrown, Alerts and Workflow can monitor and respond to conditions in those apps as well. As we talked about, the automatic notification of the relevant people, whether it's you, your staff, your customers, prospects, or vendors, can all be notified via a number of different methods. Now, people always assume email as an alert delivery method, and it's true. Email is the most common alert delivery method in Sage Alerts and Workflow, but it's by far from the only alert delivery method. Text messaging to a cell phone, automatically generating and updating web pages, dynamic web pages that simply show certain key details about your business. Wouldn't it be nice if someone down in shipping had a web page up that said, here's a list of all of the orders that have to be shipped today, or here's a list of all of the items on back order and the receipts that can fulfill them? Wouldn't it be nice for someone up in accounting to have a web page up that says, here's a list of all of the overdue invoices that we're waiting on customers from? So we talked about automatically generating and delivering relevant forms and documents like invoices, dunning notice, statements, purchase orders, and the like. And here we've got an example of an order confirmation being sent via email in PDF format, sent by Alerts and Workflow automatically. Sending out relevant forms and documents. Just think about all the forms and documents you've got within your Sage ERP solution. There are a lot of them. If these are currently being generated and delivered manually, you can completely automate that process through Sage Alerts and Workflow. But let's also talk about the automatic generation and delivery of Crystal reports. And in our new release of Sage Alerts and Workflow, that also covers Microsoft SQL reporting services. But let's talk about the automatic generation and delivery of reports. Again, in your Sage ERP system, you've got a lot of reports: AR aging, stock status, AP check reconciliation, to name just a few. Whose job is it to currently run and deliver those reports? If it is someone's job, automate that process through Alerts and Workflow. And I just want to touch upon one item on the current slide. Up at the top left, it refers to both scheduled and triggered reports. The first of those is the easy one, scheduled reports. Maybe you have an AR aging report you want to generate every Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning and deliver to a number of people. But a triggered report, for my money, is actually even more interesting and even more valuable because it's done in real time. You know, if a client gets put on credit hold on a Monday, but you don't find out about that client until the corresponding report is run on Friday, that might be too late. So with Alerts and Workflow, you can actually trigger the generation and delivery of reports based upon business conditions. For example, you could say if and when a client reaches 90% of their credit limit, at that moment, I want Alerts and Workflow to generate an AR aging report for that client and send that report to that client's sales rep. That's an example of a triggered report. And of course, when it comes to reporting and identifying conditions and activities that you and your staff need to respond to, sometimes a picture really is worth 1,000 words. So Alerts and Workflow includes a graphical reporting module. Whether it's bar charts, pie charts, line charts, you'll see a little bit later on, we'll talk about using Alerts and Workflow to identify clients who have changed their buying habits. Clients who buy from you month after month after month, and now all of a sudden they're buying a lot more or perhaps a lot less than they used to. Being able to identify conditions like those and to deliver to a salesperson a nice looking line chart that shows a customer's sales over the last 6, 9, or 12 months is awfully valuable. And that brings us to the final component of Alerts and Workflow. And this is why the application is not called Sage Alerts, but rather Sage Alerts and Workflow. Because the product can go back into your Sage application, whether it's Sage 100, Sage 500, or for that matter, any other applications, and actually add or update data. We've talked a lot about using Alerts and Workflow to monitor for overdue invoices. And if your thinking is, well, when a client becomes severely past due, we want that client to be put on credit hold. We want that client to have a different type of payment terms associated with them. Alerts and Workflow can go back into your ERP application and actually make those changes. So not just notifying people, but also updating your applications, again, to make sure that they and your staff are both equally informed. So what you see here are the 6 components of Sage Alerts and Workflow. And I do want to mention that currently we are at version 9 of Sage Alerts and Workflow. We are on the cusp of releasing version 10. Version 10 has been in the hands of our beta partners, including my colleague here at Eide Bailly, Michelle Forsey. But when we show you the application, we're going to show you a little bit of the current release, version 9, and then a little bit of version 10 as well, just to whet your appetite for the new version that's coming. So with that, let me, as promised, show you a little bit of version 9 of Sage Alerts and Workflow, and then we'll take a pause, hand over rights to Michelle, and take a quick look at version 10 as well. Okay. So I've just jumped into version 9 of Sage Alerts and Workflow. And I do want to remind you that the way Sage Alerts and Workflow operates is that it's typically installed just on a single machine within your IT environment. Alerts and Workflow does not need a dedicated server. You could put it on your Sage 100 server, your Sage 500 server. You could put it on your SQL server, on your Exchange server, or for that matter, even run it on a workstation, which is what I'm demoing it to you from today. And it's important to remember that Alerts and Workflow does operate very much like that smoke detector analogy I gave you earlier. That is, you install Alerts and Workflow. You tell it what types of business conditions that you want it to look for. You then tell it how to respond to those conditions if and when they occur. And then you turn Alerts and Workflow on and walk away from it. It runs in a lights out processing environment, just sitting out there constantly monitoring your ERP data for business conditions that are important to you. Now, a few moments ago, or maybe a little bit more than a few moments ago, I mentioned that out of the box Alerts and Workflow ships with 85 to 100 or more pre-configured business conditions for both Sage 100 and Sage 500, just to give you a brief glimpse at what some of those conditions are within the accounts receivable component alone. We're talking about identifying clients who have had their credit limit or credit status changed, clients who have invoices that are coming due or past due, clients who have aged receivables in excess of a certain dollar amount. Again, these are what come with Alerts and Workflow at no additional cost. You can use these pre-configured events, and of course, you can create an unlimited number of additional events of your own. Let me just give you a sense for how an individual event is configured and its components, and then we'll take a look at how this compares in the version 10 release, which actually has moved Alerts and Workflow from a Windows-based application to a pure web-based solution. What we've worked very hard to do is we've worked very hard between versions 9 and version 10 to keep all the components the same, but simply update the look, feel, technology, and ease of use. But I do want to start in version 9. What we're looking at here is a single event, an event that identifies invoices that are overdue for payment. Every event has the 5 components that you see listed over to the right, starting with whether the event is active and scheduled and how often we want Alerts and Workflow to look for this event's conditions. So I see that this event right now is active but not scheduled, so let's schedule it to run while we're looking at invoices that are overdue, so maybe every Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning would be sufficient. Each event has its own schedule, from monitoring for conditions continuously every few minutes, once an hour, once a day, the first or last day of the month, the third Thursday of a month, whatever is appropriate. And by the way, Alerts and Workflow includes a holiday calendar. After all, if no one's going to be in an office on a holiday or on a weekend, it's probably best to wait for the next workday before sending an alert to that person. Now, in Alerts and Workflow, you have the ability to specify what your triggering business conditions are. For this particular event, we're looking at invoices that are past due and have a balance in excess of a certain dollar amount. Here, we're looking at a threshold of $100. Everything in Alerts and Workflow is based upon security and permissions. If you have permission to change such triggering thresholds, you can do so and change this to whatever number is appropriate. We'll talk about in version 10 how we've increased the ability for Alerts and Workflow to detect business conditions, not just in your Sage ERP applications, but in other applications, including hosted applications as well. With Alerts and Workflow, clearly, we talked about using it to notify people. Any kind of content that Alerts and Workflow generates, whether it's a short text message alert to someone, a longer email message, a report, an invoice, a statement, a chart, or a graph, they're all collectively referred to as an event's deliverables. This event has quite a few, including sending out alerts via email, text message, instant message, etc. The design and modification of alert messages in Alerts and Workflow is very simple. We present you with a list of all of the fields of data, in this case from our underlying Sage 100 application. We're able to pick and choose what fields of data we want to appear in our alert. For example, we might wish to include the date of an invoice that's delinquent. So let's just go down, find our invoice date field, drop it into our alert. So the creation or customization of alerts is truly that easy. If I move this window over to the left, you'll notice that this event also has a report and a chart associated with it. A report, in this case, is our invoice form, because again, if we're using Alerts and Workflow to identify invoices that are overdue for payment, the single most logical thing for this event to do is to automatically regenerate the invoice. In this case, we've chosen PDF format, and Alerts and Workflow is automatically passing into that crystal report the numbers of just those invoices that are overdue for payment. At the same time, we're also having Alerts and Workflow generate a chart. Let's have ourselves a quick look at that chart. Whether it's pie charts, bar charts, line charts, all of those different chart types are available within Alerts and Workflow. We'll do a quick preview of this chart, and we can see that our salesperson, Shelley, has the most clients with overdue invoices in excess of $500,000. If we come back to our event, we can complete our look at it by peering at its last two components. First off are the event's subscribers. Whom do we wish to notify? Well, again, if we think about this event, identifying invoices that are overdue, might want to notify individuals such as our CFO. We might want to notify groups such as everyone in our accounting or finance department. In my case, I've chosen to notify myself, but I've also chosen to notify the customer whose invoices are overdue, as well as the sales reps or account managers for those customers. Those are referred to as dynamic recipients because, of course, they'll change based upon which invoices are overdue whenever this event runs. And by the way, all of the alert recipients can be drawn right from your ERP database. So if you think to yourself in Sage 100 and Sage 500, you've got a whole pile of customers, vendors, and you've got their email addresses. Maybe you've got their cell phone numbers for text messaging. You don't have to re-enter that into Alerts and Workflow. It can read that data dynamically out of your ERP database. And again, Alerts and Workflow can make sure that the alerts are successfully delivered. For example, in my case, if I receive an alert Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., I get notified at my work email address. But if an alert needs to reach me on Saturdays, on Sundays, before or after work hours, I actually have Alerts and Workflow sending to my personal or Gmail email address. We refer to that as Follow Me Alerts. And the final component of Alerts and Workflow, truly the workflow part of the application. This is where we can do such things as have Alerts and Workflow generate perhaps a comma-separated file of all overdue invoices in order to deliver that to perhaps a collections agency and have them follow up with those delinquent customers. Also, we can have Alerts and Workflow call other programs or procedures. This is all covered under 2 layers of security. Of course, when it comes to writing data back into a database, you need to be absolutely sure that only the appropriate people have these privileges. A very big change from version 9 to version 10 of Sage Alerts and Workflow is that in version 10, we've added the ability to make web service calls via a RESTful web API. This opens up Alerts and Workflow insofar as it now has the ability to add or update information in any application, anywhere, including cloud-based solutions. Okay, so I'm going to have a quick look here. I notice we have one chat message, but looks like not a question quite yet. So let me proceed with my discussion. I talked earlier about using Alerts and Workflow to identify, for example, when a client has changed their buying habits. That automated trend analysis to me is a real example of the strength and the flexibility of Sage Alerts and workflow. So I've actually got an event here, third one in my list, which runs on the first day of the month. It automatically identifies any customer who, for the month just ended, has placed orders that represent a decrease of at least 30% over that client's average monthly purchases. That's a pretty sophisticated set of circumstances. Let me show you how Sage Alerts and Workflow accomplishes it. As I mentioned, this particular event is scheduled to run on the first day of every month, the first work day of every month. The first thing the event does is checks to see what each customer purchased for the month just ended. Then Alerts and Workflow is going back, in this case, back 6 months for each customer to arrive at an average monthly order total per customer. And then Alerts and Workflow is comparing for each customer what they purchased last month versus their average month. And if any customer sales have dropped by at least 30% over their average monthly sales, then Alerts and Workflow is going to generate an alert. The alert is going to go out via email. It's going to include a chart showing us a customer's sales history over the last 6 months. This alert is going to get automatically delivered to the salesperson or account manager who's responsible for this client's account. Let's have ourselves a quick look at this alert message. This alert message is going out via email. You can see the subject, reading end of month, down by at least 30% versus the average month. This alert message is going out to the corresponding sales rep and saying, this customer of yours has placed orders for the previous month to date that represents a decrease of at least 30% over their average month. We're showing just 4 fields of detail here. For each customer, their previous month's orders, their average monthly orders based upon the preceding 6 months of activity, and then the decrease. The decrease represented both as a dollar amount and as a percentage. I love the idea of my sales reps coming into the office on the first workday of every month and having waiting for them 1 or more email messages to let them know about any of their customers who have significantly changed their buying habits. Okay. And so with that, you've got now a good look at version 9. I'd like to now see if we can swap over control to my colleague, Michelle, and give you a quick peek at version 10. What I'm going to do here is let me just come down to a particular branch here. I'm going to get ourselves settled. And let's take a look at, well, we were just talking about trend analysis. I see we've got a bunch of trend analysis items there. Let's go in and let's actually take a look at some inventory-related business conditions. So let me just display a list of a few events. Hopefully we've got a few here, or perhaps not.
I don't think there are.
Okay.
You can look at the queries. If you look at that SPC events, yeah, I mean, you're welcome to go through.
All right, so you mentioned SPC events, so let's just bounce over to that branch. And there we go, super. Thank you very much for the help on that, Michelle. All right, everyone. So what we're looking at here is version 10 of Sage Alerts and Workflow, also known as Knowledge Sync. You'll notice that name up at the top left. That's our internal name for the Sage Alerts and Workflow technology. I wanted to take you into the version 10 product, which is finishing up its final stage of beta, going to its initial release to a limited group of customers and partners in just about 2 weeks from now. So I wanted to take you in here to point out some of the key differences between version 9 and the version 10 that we're looking at currently. First of all, as you probably noticed, this is now all within a web browser. So it really opens up access to Sage Alerts and Workflow. All you need is access to any internet browser, and you can gain access to Sage Alerts and Workflow. Also, a big change in version 9 to version 10, the different modules within Alerts and Workflow, and there are primarily 3 of them. The module that we're in right now called the Event Designer, which is where you go to create or customize events. There is also a second module called the Administrator, where initial system configuration is done. And thirdly, the monitor, kind of an online audit trail of everything Alerts and Workflow has done. In version 9, those were separate standalone modules. In version 10, they're now all brought into just the one web user interface. So we've greatly simplified navigation, put everything in one place. And as a further example of that, let's go into a specific event and choose to edit it. So we're going to take a look at this event called New Orders Created, Sending an Email Alert. Now, if you take a look down towards the lower part of this window, what you'll see is that all components of an event are right here. So not a lot of tabs that you're having to click on and off of or bring up other windows. Starting with the name of the event itself and the details about it. So the priority of the event and other configuration parameters. This event currently does not have a schedule. We can add a schedule such as, well, let's see, if we're looking at new orders, we might want to look at new orders every hour as an example. Even more frequently than that, let's set that to every 30 minutes. So we've just successfully set the event's schedule. I mentioned that one of the big differences between version 9 and version 10, and that is that in version 10, we've added the ability for Alerts and Workflow to access data in additional locations or sources, perhaps would be the better word. In version 9, Alerts and Workflow can look only at the data within an application's own database, and that via a communication technology called ODBC. It's a Microsoft standard. It stands for Open Database Connectivity. In version 10, we've added in support for 2 additional types of queries. The first of those being OLEDB or OLEDB, and the third of those being a .NET data provider. Version 10 of Sage Alerts and Workflow is a 100% .NET technology. Perhaps most important of all of the enhancements in version 10 is integration with a RESTful Web Service API. And what's really cool, if you don't mind my using that term, about this functionality in version 10 is that it is a bi-directional integration tool. And what I mean by that is the following. Version 10 of Sage Alerts and Workflow can read data from a hosted or cloud-based application by making web service calls to that hosted application. Version 9 did not have the ability to do so. But that use of a web service API to read data from a database, to see if a database has experienced certain conditions or activities, goes beyond just reading information in a database. You can, for example, use a web service call to look at simple web pages of data, such as accessing information from the New York Times website or other websites. So this web API here as a triggering mechanism really opens up Alerts and Workflow for being able to read data from any source, whether that's an application, a web page, a cloud-based application, etc. The other part of the web service integration comes under the heading of deliverables. Now, you may recall from a couple moments ago, I talked about how Alerts and Workflow can generate reports and charts, how it can send alerts via a number of different methods. All of those are collectively referred to as an event's deliverables. This event only has currently a single deliverable, sending out alerts via email. But if you look over on the right-hand side of the window, you'll see that other alert delivery methods are listed here, as are, again, reports and charts and files. And by the way, version 10 supports both Crystal reports as well as Microsoft SQL reporting services, also known as SRSS. So that's an important addition in version 10. But do look over to the right. You'll notice under the actions available for an event, in addition to some of the actions I mentioned earlier, such as creating a comma-separated file for a collections agency, we've also added Web API integration here. What that means is that alerts and workflow can write data back into a database or back to a website using, once again, a RESTful web API. And that's what we mean about this web API being bidirectional. The web service integration in version 10 means that Sage Alerts and Workflow can both read data through a web service, as well as write data back into an application or website through this web API. So I wanted to touch upon that as well. The other components of an alert, of an event, just as we saw before, the subscribers for an event. So enabling you to choose to notify individuals or groups. So as you can see, the differences between version 9 and version 10, some additional integration tools, the underlying architecture going to .NET, but perhaps most of all is the entire application becoming web-based, so you can access the application, set up and modify events all through your web browser. And one last note about version 10 before I jump back into our PowerPoint, and that is that version 10 is fully cloud ready and multi-tenant. So that simply adds to your implementation options when it comes to leveraging Sage Alerts and Workflow. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Michelle, for making your system available to us. So I just want to finish up with a couple of comments about how Sage Alerts and Workflow is licensed and priced, and some steps that you can take for moving forward from here. I think you'll find that the pricing on Sage Alerts and Workflow is very affordable. In fact, a couple of the industry analysts suggested that we increase the pricing of this solution by a factor of 10 to get more in line with other BI or business intelligence solutions. That's something that we didn't want to do. We wanted to make Alerts and Workflow priced at a point that it became kind of a no-brainer decision, an automatic add-on to your ERP and related applications. So let's take the scenario up at the top of the slide as our example. Let's say that you want to start out by using Sage Alerts and Workflow to monitor your Sage 100 or Sage 500 application for an unlimited number of business conditions, including all of the ones that ship with the product, the 85 to 100 pre-configured events, as well as the ability for you to modify those events and create an unlimited number of additional events of your own, including the ability for you to trigger alerts to your staff, clients, vendors, and suppliers, those alerts being delivered via all the methods I mentioned, email, text message, dynamic web dashboard, etc., and the ability to generate forms, documents, reports, as well as the ability to execute workflow to add or update information in your business applications. You'd be looking at a one-time license price of just under $3,300. Again, that is a one-time purchase price. It's not a per user fee. There are no per user fees whatsoever with Sage Alerts and Workflow. You would be looking at an additional 20%, roughly $650 a year for the annual maintenance and support. The product is also available on a monthly subscription basis should you wish it. The only upgrade options available for Sage Alerts and Workflow are if you wish to use it to monitor applications in addition to your Sage ERP solution. So maybe you're using a CRM solution like Sage CRM, Sugar CRM, Microsoft CRM, or even Salesforce.com. You can use Alerts and Workflow to connect to monitor data within those applications as well. For each additional application to be monitored, it's an additional $1,799. Once you reach a grand total of 4 applications being monitored, you're automatically granted what's called the unlimited application license of Sage Alerts and Workflow, enabling you to use it to monitor every single business application that you own today or ever will own. So, just to recap some of the business benefits of Sage Alerts and Workflow and this data driving technology. Number one, it integrates with all of your business applications, not just your Sage ERP solution. It delivers any needed information to any person via any device located anywhere. It automates the process of form and document generation and delivery. It audits your Sage ERP application. For example, if you've ever had a client whose credit limit or credit status has changed, and you think to yourself, I wonder who changed it, when, and what they changed it from and to, Alerts and Workflow can do that automated auditing for you. And just as a side note, the very last item on the current slide, Sage Alerts and Workflow can also monitor the content of incoming email. So if within your organization you have email accounts such as info@yourcompany.com, sales at, or support at, if those generic email accounts are simply black holes where emails go to die, well, you can utilize Sage Alerts and Workflow to automatically monitor that email traffic, automatically notify people, and automatically respond to those incoming emails with the requested information or actions. Now, this concept of operational business intelligence, I think what really makes it stand out as a unique technology, number one, it is less than 1/10 the price of typical BI solutions. Those are those business intelligence solutions focused on managers and executives. Sage Alerts and Workflow is typically installed and up and running in about half a day, 4 hours of time. You don't need to train your end users in it. Why? Well, they're not using it. They're getting their alerts. They're automatically having workflows created for them, but it's not an application that your end users need to be logging into, learning, and utilizing on a daily basis. And perhaps most importantly, there are, in fact, now just over 11,000 customers using this technology. Our support department receives 7.8 incoming requests for support a day. That really speaks to the fact that Alerts and Workflow is a set it and forget it application. Most of our clients we don't hear from but once a year when they renew their annual maintenance and support agreements. Now, just so that we make sure to leave time for any questions that come up at the end of our time today, I'm going to just skip over this slide, just some additional examples of client uses. If you're interested in receiving these case studies, we certainly are more than happy to make them available to you. One particular customer who leveraged Sage Alerts and Workflow is an organization called Toyo Inc. They're a multinational provider of ink for printing presses. They implemented Sage Alerts and Workflow right about at the 6-month period of their implementation. They informed us that they had just passed over 20,000 alert messages sent to their customers, their staff, and their suppliers. They were able to quantify a savings of over $11,000 a month, as well as a savings of over 100 staff work hours every month. And they left us with the wonderful quotation, Alerts and Workflow does the work of 1 to 2 full-time staff members. In terms of your identifying whether a data-driven initiative would be of benefit to your organization, I'd ask you to ask yourself the following questions. Do you have a lot of date-sensitive information that your organization needs to keep on top of? Do you have critical thresholds that need to be monitored and responded to when they're reached or neared? Do you have certain business activities that should happen on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, but sometimes don't? I like to say sometimes the most important information you need to know about isn't something that has happened, but rather something that should have happened, but hasn't. Do you as an organization use exception management to identify anomalies within your business transactions? Do you rely upon trend analysis to identify key changes within your business? And lastly, do you need to know when critical business data is changed? We talked about enterprise-wide auditing just a moment ago. And of course, I shouldn't forget, do you have those redundant manual processes, such as the generation and delivery of forms, documents, and reports that really should be automated? To help you identify these needs, you can actually visit the alertsandworkflow.com website. Again, that's www.alertsandworkflow.com. Look for the question that reads, does my organization need alerts and workflow? Click here to find out. That will bring you into a free needs assessment. You can take it on your own, you can take it multiple times, and it takes about 5 to 7 minutes to go through. It'll ask you questions about different business processes within your organization, and then finish up by presenting you with what you see on the current slide, a report card showing you for what alerts and workflow can do your corresponding business need based upon your own organization's business processes and your current level of automation. And so with that, I've left about 5 or so minutes for any questions, comments, etc. So at this point, let me stop speaking for a bit and see if anyone has any questions that I can answer.
Awesome, Don. Thank you so much. So far, I haven't seen any questions come in. If anybody has a question, want to raise their hand, we can unmute you. Michelle, do you want to? Michelle's been doing some of the beta testing with Don. Michelle, do you want to add anything before we go?
No, not really, Don. Thank you so much. Anybody that's on the call, and I know we've had a few people drop off as we got close to the end. As we said in the beginning, this will be recorded. So if you need to forward this on to the powers that be, we'll have this up on our iAbility blog and feature it in our newsletter at the end of the month, which, by the way, if you're not checking the blog or getting the newsletter, let Julie know. But if you would like a deeper dive into version 10, as soon as we have permission from the VineyardSoft team, we would be happy to set up a demo, either a technical demo for your technical team or a higher level demo if need be. So it really, truly, this was the first extended solution I ever learned, and it is by far my favorite. And as Don said, it's a no-brainer at that cost. I mean, I'd love to see anybody hire a full-time employee for, even if you did the unlimited, for $5,000 a year. Like, you're not going to do it. It's a great solution. So questions can be followed up with afterwards with Julie and I as well.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Appreciate that. Been a pleasure certainly working with you and your colleagues. So yeah, I would certainly encourage folks, you can download and try out the application for free. And if any questions come up, feel free to contact myself, Julie, Michelle, or any of us, and we'll be glad to help.